Thank you all for joining us today. This is the 5th talk of the 3rd season for IGCP648. Today we have Dr. Maëlis Arnould, which is assistant professor at the University of Lyon in France, University Claude Bernard, if I may. And she will present mantle plumes and plate tectonics interaction, some insight from whole-mantle convection models.
Okay, so thank you, Luc, and hi everyone, and thanks for attending. So yes, today I will focus on how the interactions between mantle plumes and plate tectonics can affect Earth surface evolution. And this is a collaborative work with researchers who are from France, from China, and Australia mostly. So I just wanted to start with this figure from Wilson, just to stress how much our understanding of the causes of plate tectonic motions has been bounded to our understanding of hotspot tracks and mantle plumes. And as you can see here, already in 1963, while researcher was still investigating the possible forces leading to mountain ranges, to the formation of oceans, Wilson proposed that mantle convection could be one central piece of the puzzle, and that hotspot tracks could record the presence of mantle upwelling and thus mantle convection, which would in turn participate to plate motions. And at that time and until now, people have been investigating the causes of these hotspot tracks that we can see at the surface of the Earth. And now, thanks to seismology, we have a clear picture of what's below most hotspot tracks, especially below oceans. And those are mantle plume conduits, and they are focused areas of hotter and more buoyant than average mantle that would lead to slow seismic speeds and hotspot magmatism at the surface of the Earth. And the surface plate motions above mantle plumes would be responsible for hotspot tracks. And while Wilson didn't rule out that mantle plumes could move within the mantle, a bit later, Jason Morgan, who is considered as the father of the mantle plume theory, thought that mantle plumes are fixed in the mantle. And actually, from this hypothesis, it will start again, I think, with the normal color, yeah. And so from this hypothesis, people have started to reconstruct past plate motions, and they actually used mantle plumes as fixed reference frame, as shown on this animation, for example, with the yellow dots that are fixed. And when you reconstruct plate motions, past plate motions, what we tend to think now is that plate tectonic self-organization and reorganizations have led to specific organization of continents into the so-called supercontinent cycle, or the Wilson cycle, which is sketched here. And as you can see, continents would endure aggregation phases, then separation phases over timescales of 300 to 500 million years. And more we think that such supercontinent cycles are actually related to internal changes in mantle convection, in large-scale mantle convection, as seen in those geochemical signals, or also in geodynamic model. And so from all this, we can ask ourselves during which stage of these supercontinent cycles mantle plumes can play a role, a geodynamic role. And to reply to this question, the straight answer would be to look at the stages of extension here, during which, so starting from a peneplain continent, rifting would occur and lead to supercontinent breakup. And so scientists have actually noticed, so as you can see in this graph, that when you have breakup of the continents, especially Pangea, this is linked with large igneous province eruptions and major eruptions of those, which are often related to the arrival of a mantle plume head below the lithosphere. And this would suggest that mantle plume can play a more or less active role in continental rifting. There are other maybe participants, but that's one of the explanation. And so in this presentation, I will actually focus on these 3 different stages of the supercontinent cycle, and I will revisit a bit, maybe, the role of mantle plumes on plate tectonics in these different contexts. And so to do so, I will use 3D models of whole-mantle convection that self-generate plate-like tectonics. And it's actually an important modeling factor because, as I just mentioned before, mantle convection and plate tectonics are highly related. And so from there, from these models, we'll be actually able to draw some conclusion about the diversity of geodynamic roles of mantle plume in shaping our Earth surface. So let's start, and let's first have a look at those numerical models. So in particular, we'll see how we do to model self-consistent plate-like behavior and mantle convection. We'll see what's the behavior of mantle plumes in particular, and the third thing that we'll focus on is how does it compare to what we know from the Earth's plumes. So what we did is that we used Stag YY code, which is developed in Zurich by Paul Tackley mainly and his team, to model 3D models of whole-mantle convection like this one that you can see here. And we use actually the Pussinesque approximation to model convection. And this will model an incompressible fluid. And here we use as well a knot-like Rayleigh number of 10 to the 7, and a viscosity law that generates 7 orders of lateral and radial viscosity variation throughout the domain. And the last piece, the last ingredient in these models that's quite important is the pseudoplastic rheology, because it allows the localization of surface deformation into what we'll call plate boundaries that you can see here, for example. So here you have the topography at the surface of these models. And we also have continents that are here modeled and initialized as with the shapes of the actual continents on Earth, but then they can move freely over the mantle. And yeah, they are just with a different density, viscosity, and yield stress contrast. And all those models actually produce plate-like tectonics with the Earth-like surface topography, heat flow, and plate velocities. And so that's why they are quite useful then to be able to compare stuffs with the Earth. And if we specifically look at mantle plume characteristics that arise from these models, we can actually compare these observations of mantle plume, these with observations of mantle plume that we have from the Earth. So here in the center, you can see the values, the ranges of some values of some characteristics of mantle plumes, like the radius, the buoyancy flux, which is the force of the plume, that induces like a deflection of the surface, the delta T, or the temperature difference between the mantle plume and the ambient mantle, and surface heat flux. And so on these graphs, you can see that in one model, for example, the range of mantle plume radiuses that we have is about 75 kilometers in the uppermost mantle, which kind of fits the observations. And we can say roughly the same with the heat flux, the buoyancy flux, and the temperature excess. So now that we have our models, let's go back to our supercontinent cycle, and let's first have a look at what happens during continental rifting. So here you have a movie that I will run, which models and shows you the complex tectonic behaviors that can arise from these sort of models. And for example, you'll see here a breakup phase in one of the models. And so it's here you can see the surface of the model, and so the gray area show the position of the continents, and the colored area show actually the oceanic lithosphere. And the color scale is just showing the depth of the base of the lithosphere. So when it's red, it means that we have a rift, so the lithosphere is very thin. And when it's blue, it means that the lithosphere is quite thick, and then you have an old ocean seafloor. And you can see that it's not it's not very homogeneous here, because we have small scale convection in the mantle. And on the other side, here you have the interior of the mantle, and what's sketched here is an isotherm which shows the mantle plumes. So now we'll run the model, and you'll see a breakup phase that will happen during this model. Something that I forgot to say is that you'll see green areas in the continents that show where there's the localization of deformation. And here you can see the breakup, which is kind of happening. So if I play it again, if we focus on what's below the lithosphere, you can probably see here that where the supercontinent will breakup will rifting will propagate, you actually have mantle plumes that are below and that are pre-existing to the breakup. And what they actually seem to do is that they thermally erode the continental lithosphere so that it's thinner and it's more able to break. So, yes, so this figure summarizes the evolution of the number of mantle plumes through time during all this model evolution. So you can see that I showed you just a small piece of this model, but it actually runs for 1.5 billion years, which took actually a very long time. It took 9 months to run. And on top of it, you can see the different phases of supercontinent breakup, collision, etc. And so here we focused on the supercontinent breakup, which is happening in this region. And associated with this, you can see that the number of mantle plumes that are below the lithosphere is actually rising a bit before rifting happens. And as we could see in the movie, the breakup is actually associated with both thermal erosion of the lithosphere, and what I didn't show is that there's also subcontinental heating below the supercontinents, and it's due to thermal insulation, and that's already been shown by other models. So now let's have a look at what happens in a mature ocean. That so yeah, let's see at what we have now in our on Earth, and what the models can help us to reconstruct. So we'll focus here on plume and oceanic lithosphere interactions, and in particular we focus on plume-ridge interactions. So for a long time, I think Jason Morgan already noticed that many ocean mantle plumes are actually linked or related or very close to ridges, as you can see here with the orange dots and the ridges that are in red. And here we'll actually focus on one specific case, which is the interaction between the Azores plume and the Mid-Atlantic ridge. And so to give you some setting, some insight about the setting. The Azores Plateau is actually located in the Atlantic Ocean along the Mid-Atlantic ridge. And it's located at the triple junction between the African plate, the European, and the North American plate. And if you look at seismic tomography or helium ratio, what you see is that there's some anomaly that are related often to maybe a deeply rooted plume origin. And so the past evolution of this plume and its associated hotspot tracks are still actually quite debated. And so the first reconstruction that we can see here was actually using the assumption that mantle plumes are fixed. And if so, we would get these hotspot tracks here in orange, which is not really associated to any visible seamount. And in this scenario, you would have another distinct mantle plume, which is the corner rise and great meteor plume, and associated with this magenta hotspot track. And using some evidence that mantle plumes are maybe not fixed, here you can see a figure that's from a numerical model by Steinberger and collaborator. They actually predict a hotspot, a mantle plume motion and a hotspot tracks that would lie here on the other side, actually, from what the fixed hotspot theory would lead. So this was the hotspot track that they would propose, and it would lie on the North American plate now. And then there's the last hotspot track that was proposed. So it's based on the analysis of the seafloor tectonic fabric around the Azores hotspot, and together with geochemical considerations. And so according to these studies, the Azores would have interacted with the mid-Atlantic ridge and participated to the building of the corner rise and the great meteor seamounts. So here you would see the two tracks. And so you would have these two hotspot tracks because of an interaction between the plume and the mid-Atlantic ridge. So what we did is that we sort of looked back at the observations around the Azores. And so as you can see here in this seismic tomographic map, there's a large slow anomaly, which is visible in the upper mantle, below the mid-Atlantic ridge, and it's actually kind of asymmetric, and it coincides with the bathymetry, the gravity anomalies, and the geochemical signature of the basalts that are here shown projected along the mid-Atlantic ridge. So to discriminate, this would mean that we have a sort of asymmetry here. And so to discriminate between the different proposed hotspot tracks and understand the geological asymmetry that we could see in those observations, we actually conducted a petrological study of some samples that were collected along the mid-Atlantic ridge. And we used then the prime-melt method, which is a method that allows to discriminate a plume signature in a sample and to constrain the potential temperature of the mantle from which the basalt samples originated, to try to confirm this asymmetry that we could maybe see in this figure of the seismic tomography. So here you can see the results of this method, which are represented on a map here, and on a latitudinal cross-section against depth here. So what the color scale of the dots shows is the potential temperature of the mantle below the ridge that we could recover from the primate method. You can see that there are hotter temperatures in red that are associated with the Azores. And from these results, you can see also that the potential temperature of the mantle kind of drops faster on the northern side of the Azores than on the southern side. And so this confirms the existence of a southward elongated thermal anomaly beneath the mid-Atlantic ridge in the vicinity of the Azores mantle plume. And so in terms of length, this would extend over 1,000 kilometers north of the Azores and 2,500 kilometers south of the Azores. And the question we then asked was that, what is the origin of the asymmetry that we could see here, which is probably linked to a mantle plume and ridge and plate interaction process. So the hypothesis that we used is that to become asymmetric, the thermal trail of a plume, which is here represented with this green contour, if it's located below a ridge, which is shown here in red, it needs to be shared by the relative motion between the plate system and the plume conduit. And so this hypothesis has been actually developed in many different semi-analytical models that study the interaction between plumes and ridge, but in very simple cases. And so in our case, we actually used a numerical model like the one I just described in introduction. And I studied the plume-ridge interaction to have an idea of how they interact with ridges. And so in these models, what we can see actually is that about half of the plumes actually interact with ridges in many different ways. And here you can see some of the variety of the plume-ridge interactions. For example, here you can see that we have stable plume-ridge interactions. Here you have plume-induced ridge jump, where the former ridge was located there, and then it's straighter here. It jumps straighter to the other side. You can have plume-induced ridge propagation, where depending on the plume ridge relative motion, you can create another branch of ridge. And then we have unstable plume-ridge interactions, and this actually occurs a lot in back arc basins. So here you can see a subduction here, because those places are evolving quite fast. So in our case, we were actually able to describe 4 different cases of interactions between mantle plumes and ridges. And for example, in the first case, the plume is actually moving in the opposite direction to the net plate motion, which is shown in red. And this results in an elongation of the thermal wake in the same direction as the plate motion. And for example, in the second case, the plume is moving alongside with the plate motions, but faster than them. And this creates a relative motion and a shearing that results in a thermal wake, which is opposite to the direction of the plate motions. And so from the study of the geometry of the thermal anomaly of the Azores and the surface plate motion, we can actually recover the absolute plume motion, plume motion, because we can have an idea of what's happening at the surface. So if we look back at our geological setting, what we have is that we use an absolute reference frame with a moving hotspot to infer the absolute plate motions in the vicinity of the Azores. And what we can see is that basically all the plates around the Azores are kind of moving northward. And if we plot back the thermal anomaly that we could see in the mantle, this is now oriented southward, which is in the opposite direction from the plate motion. So that would mean that we are in this case 2, in this scenario where you would have a northward motion of the Azores plume faster than the plate motion, the absolute plate motions. And this would be necessary to induce this thermal asymmetry. Okay. And so our proposed scenario of the northward motion of the Azores plume along the ridge. So here you can see the absolute motion that we propose is actually it allows us to kind of validate the third proposed hotspot track that I described earlier, and maybe a genetic link between the Azores and the corner rise and great meteor seamounts. And this scenario also implies that there would be a long-lived absolute motion of the plume beneath the ridge by 1 or 2 centimeters per year during the last 85 million years to be able to produce this asymmetry. But then we can ask ourselves, okay, what can be the possible cause for hotspot motion? So here again, we'll try to use our geodynamic model. And so from our model that you cannot see at the moment, we were actually able to distinguish 4 categories of behavior of mantle plumes and absolute motion of mantle plumes. So in some cases, mantle plumes are quite stable, and those are located at saddle points of the lowermost mantle flow. And most of them are also moving very slowly. And these ones are actually entrained by basal mantle flow. And we also have a minority of plumes that are drifting faster. And those belong to 2 categories. There's one category which is intermediate speed. And these mantle plumes velocity that range from 1 to 5 centimeters per year are actually linked with the fact that they are pushed or interacting with slabs in the lowermost mantle. And the fastest plume were plumes that are actually merging together. And this can create 5 to 15 centimeters per year motions that we could see at the surface due to the fact that they are actually attracted to each other. And so from these numerical models, actually a long-term push of the Azores by slabs remnants in the lower mantle can probably provide the source for this plume motion. And so you can see here what happens in one of these models, where you have the initiation of a slab that kind of reorganizes the mantle flow in the lowermost mantle and is able to push the mantle plume, which initial position is shown by the pink dot here. And if you look back at the seismic tomography today, so here you have a roughly south-north cross-section. What you can see is that the conduit associated, well, the slow seismic anomaly associated with the Azores plume is actually close to a high speed regions, and yeah, maybe we can say that suggest that those lab remnants are responsible for the northward motion of the Azores plume. Okay, so now let's come back to the supercontinent cycle. And during the last part of my talk, I will actually focus on how mantle plumes can play a role on surface plate tectonics during continent convergence stages. And this is something that's already been proposed, especially in the case of the motion of India towards Asia. Where you have a speeding of this, a speeding of India towards Eurasia that's been probably related to the Deccan plume or the Rhenian plume that would have provided some plume push force and maybe provoked this acceleration of India towards Eurasia. But this has been challenged quite recently by some people that think that this actually this speed, this acceleration of India is is maybe an artifact of our plate reconstruction and paleomagnetism. So it's not clear what's going on in this region. So we'll focus here on this region and see how we can relate mantle plumes and the geodynamics of the closure of the Neo-Tethys Ocean, which was lying between India and Eurasia. So I'm not sure my movie works, but yes, what? So if we come back to the Neo-Tethys closure, what we can see is that it's probably associated with the activity of quite a long intraoceanic subductions, which is called the South Neo-Tethys subduction. And since this ocean has now entirely vanished, it's actually quite difficult to reconstruct what was going on here. And we have quite sparse remnants of this activity, of this South Neo-Tethys subduction, which are in the form of ophiolites, which are shown here in red. And these ophiolites are actually resulting from the abduction of oceanic lithosphere, and they are now spread over 6,000 kilometers along the suture zone of the Neo-Tethys. And these ophiolites actually contain precious information on the closure of the Neo-Tethys Ocean and the characteristics of its oceanic lithosphere, because we could see that some ophiolites actually contain a strong OIB geochemical signal, which is normally associated to the presence of a mantle plume. And by using lutetium and hafnium method, some people could also find that there are hot mantle temperature associated with the metamorphic soles of some of the ophiolites, which record the thermodynamic conditions of the initiation of the South Neo-Tethys subduction. So that would mean that near the initiation of the South Neo-Tethys, you would have a source of heat that would be close to it. So based on these observations, we actually explored the hypothesis of the role of the mantle plume in inducing the South Neo-Tethys subductions instead of pushing the plates from the other side of India. So let's see what happens. So first, what would be this plume? So this plume would be actually the protodeccan plume, or the Reunion plume. And if you look at the geological record, there are actually some geochemical evidence in the Pakistan that suggests that the Reunion plume was active before the Deccan traps, and about 40 million years earlier than the eruption of these Deccan traps. And if we search for different modes of subduction initiation in the literature, we can find that mantle plumes can cause subduction zones, depending on several parameters like the plume buoyancy flux, the plate age and thickness, or the lithospheric stresses. But all these models actually limit themselves to the first stages of the initiation of subduction by plumes, and we wanted to see if those subductions could evolve over long time scales. So what we did is that we used numerical models like the one I described to try to provide to study both the initiation and the long-term evolution of an intraoceanic plume-induced subduction in interaction with moving continents, with mantle heterogeneities and other tectonic and mantle features. And so here you can see a mantle plume that just arrived at the surface, and in blue you can see the slabs that are propagating from their initiation location, which was here. So here you can see it again, and you see the pieces of slabs that are kind of propagating towards the continents that are shaded here. And as you can see here, the slabs can interact with the different plumes and kind of rebound next to them. So in the models that I studied, actually plume-induced subductions can occur once every 100 million years in average. And often it's thanks to the thermal erosion of the base of the lithosphere. And also depending on the conjugation of specific factors as shown by others, such as the plume buoyancy flux, the nature of the lithosphere above the plume, and the ambient lithospheric stresses. And so if we decompose the tectonic history associated with the different stages of the sequence that you just saw, we actually can observe the development of multiple ridges and small plates. So this is just a few times steps of this evolution. And we can see also the propagation of long segments of subductions, which are those ones, for example, which started from this very small one. And we also have an age progression of the abduction, because the subductions kind of deactivate along with the margin of the continents once they reach them, and it's kind of progressive towards this this direction, for example. And so up here, oops. And so here we can also see that those subductions are actually characterized by fast trench retreats, which are partly driven by the lateral astenospheric flow of plumes, and that they interact with other tectonic and mantle feature that results in multiple polarity reversals, as you can see here and as you could see in the movie. And so if we look at the surface velocity patterns that are associated with these mantle plume-induced subductions, we can also see that we can create fast plate velocity associated with these events, fast spreading rates, multiple small plate rotations, and actually regional reorganization events of plate boundaries and motion. And so these patterns are actually robust, and they even if I'm looking at different models and tectonic and convective environments, I found the same kind of feature. So the interesting thing is that when you look at the Neothetis observations, you see that around the basin of the Neothetis, from paleomagnetism, you record such features like small plate rotations, plate reorganizations, fast spreading rates, and fast plate velocities that we couldn't really explain without invoking multiple subductions, etc. So here is our proposed reconstruction, so which would account for both the patterns that we observe in the models and the geological observations that I just told you. So around 100 million years ago, you would have the initiation of this proto-decant plume, and this generates a highly curved plume-induced subduction. And then due to the fast retreat of this subduction and its interaction with the continental, the microcontinental blocks, this South Neothetis subduction would have propagated at the scale of the entire basin, as you can see here, and then deactivate, dislocate into several independent branches, which when they reach the continental margin would cause abductions to happen progressively. And then this is the situation at 60 million years. Here in conclusion with this new scenario, what we have is that we can create with a unique event, which is this plume-induced subduction, we could create 2 global plate reorganization events that have been recorded actually in the ocean fabric. So one around 105 million years at the time of the initiation, and the second one between 73 and 64 million years when all the subductions have reached the margins. And in our scenario, plate rotations, fragmentations are also the results of these plume-induced subduction events and its subsequent fast retreat and dislocation. In other scenarios, such as, for example, this one, you could see that we had to initiate multiple subductions to explain the subsequent abduction of that are now observed in the geological record, and that are necessary to explain these plate rotations and multiple rotation between different blocks. And also something that we can stress is that within our supercontinent cycle picture, this timing of the arrival of the protodeccan plume head at the surface of the Earth will actually fit with the burst of the leap observed during the late Cretaceous, and probably with the large-scale dynamics of mantle convection at that time. With this, we could say that mantle plumes would rather act by inducing plate reorganization leading to convergence, rather than providing a direct plume push to plate motions in the context of supercontinent aggregation. So to finish with, I just wanted to stress that here I provided a glimpse of some of the possibility offered by the combination of some observations, some geological observations, with the use of numerical models of whole-mantle convection, with which self-generate plate tectonics, in order to geodynamically constrain geological observation and better understand surface evolution. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to take questions.